Reverend Rick Branch. Reverend Branch has been the minister of music at First United Methodist Church in Pensacola for more than 21 years. He's currently working on his doctorate in sacred music. He's an ordained minister in the United Methodist Church, and he is one of the founding members of the Escambia Youth Justice Coalition.
Thank you. I also greatly appreciate everyone being here tonight, especially on this Sunshine State kind of day that we're having. And I also do not want to be entered into the hair contest after I got blown apart coming in. I'm going to probably talk just a little bit longer than these others did individually, but the good news is I've got it on paper here, and since I'm a minister, I won't go from the paper, so I won't take any longer than I really need to. I'm going to try and give you a little bit more of a personal, some anecdotes and some personal stories from a little bit more inside the system. I wish that I didn't know anything at all about this topic. But about 5.5 years ago, Warren, who was the small blonde-headed boy that you saw in the pictures in the TED Talk, Warren, when he was a 14-year-old 8th grader who was small, quiet, academically and artistically talented, he was a boy in my church, and in my youth choir, he shot and killed his father while they were watching TV, and his mom was at a PTSA meeting. We will never know why he did it. He had a great relationship with his father. That afternoon, my daughter rode in their carpool that his father drove, and everything was very fine. We'll never know why he did it. He does not have a memory of that night, so he will never know why he did it. But I truly believe it was an anomaly of who Warren is. His mom has stood by him and stood up for him more than I have thought humanly possible. And if anything, loves Warren even more today than she did 5 years ago. And his mom is Ann, who is here tonight. So we greatly appreciate Ann being here. Please keep in mind that most of the kids that we are talking about when we're talking about those who are tried as adults are not actually like Warren. More than half of them are charged for non-violent crimes. And most are not white. Black and Hispanic children are 60% of the children arrested in Florida, but 76% of those who are transferred to adult court. As his pastor, I visited Warren 7 times in the juvenile detention center during the 13 days he was there. And then when the district attorney declared that Warren was an adult and he was direct filed and transferred to the adult jail, I visited him over 100 times during the 1.5 years that he was in the Escambia jail. Out of concern for Warren's safety, since he was unusually small, and smaller than any of the boys who were in the adult jail at that time, he was first kept in solitary confinement in the infirmary. Once he couldn't stand that anymore, he asked to be transferred to the boys section. Coincidentally, when they have girls who are kept in the adult jail, they are typically kept in solitary confinement in the infirmary because there is nowhere else to keep them. Not too long after he was transferred to the adult jail, both of Warren's grandfathers died on the same day. One, Warren knew had been ill. The other, it was a complete surprise. The jail did break one of their rules at the jail chaplain's request by letting me tell Warren about the deaths instead of the chaplain having to tell them. And for about 30 seconds, they were going to let me be in the same room with him when I told him. But as soon as the chaplain was trying to tell me that good news, the phone rang again, and they said, no, they're not going to do that. So I had to tell Warren about his grandfathers over the phone through a plexiglass separation. I also led scores of weekly Bible studies for all of the boys in the adult jail who were awaiting trials as adults. During those first days in the juvenile detention center, I was able to visit with Warren for as long as I wanted. And one day I was astonished to find that 2.5 hours had gone by. I was allowed to sit in the same room with him for our visits. It was a glass room in the center of the larger room where the guards could look in and check on Warren's well-being. And I could hold his hands while I prayed for him and hug him goodbye. The visits in the adult jail were over the phone with the plexiglass partition between us, and our conversations were recorded. The pastoral visits are limited to once a week and at a specific time and for no more than 1 hour. But by the time they process me into the jail and process Warren to the phone booth, it was sometimes more than 30 minutes into the visitation. For the Bible studies that I led, I was taken deeper into the county jail where they kept the boys who were being tried as adults. Even though I was there every Friday from 5 to 6 p.m., I was amazed at the number of different guards who rotated through the juvenile area. I was more likely to see a guard I had never seen before than to recognize one who had been there before. I witnessed many different guards interact with the boys, and during the 2.5 years that I went into the adult jail, I only saw a few who treated the boys with any degree of kindness or concern for their welfare. These children are not just little adults. Warren was physically so small the night he was arrested that his handcuffs fell off of him 3 times that night before he arrived at the jail. And we know, based on the studies that have been done, that were talked about in the TED Talk, that they're not just children in adult-sized bodies, that they do have child-sized brains. Now, I have visited children in the Juvenile Detention Center, and I visited children in the Escambia adult jails. I've worked closely with the DJJ adults at the local and at the state levels, and I've tried to work closely with adults in the county jail. Numerous DJJ officials have truly inspired me by their love and dedication to the work that they do and to the children entrusted in their care. I'm sorry to say that I cannot say that I have the same impression about the people at the county jail who have the children entrusted to their care. When Warren accepted his plea deal, and it was Warren who accepted it and no longer had any legal rights since Warren was considered an adult. So at 15, he was allowed to make that decision by himself. My daughter is 17 and is asking us every night for help in trying to figure out the next 4 years of her life. I surely wouldn't want her to make that decision about the next 20 years all on her own. Here's one more anecdote about the mind of a child. When Warren was still in the Juvenile Detention Center and we were talking about the possibility of him being moved to the adult jail, I asked him if he was worried about that. And he said, no, it'll be okay. They say the food's better over there. That's what was important to him at the time. So when Warren accepted his plea deal, he was immediately moved to a different part of the adult jail, one that contained other boys who had been found guilty as guards, and like Warren were waiting to be transferred to the state prison system. But there were also adults in that section. Sometimes a boy in the juvenile section will age out. He'll turn 18 while he's still waiting for his adult trial. When that happens, they transfer him usually at midnight, the day of his birthday. Otherwise, he will be an adult who is being housed with juveniles. One of the boys that I got to know there knew his birthday was coming up, and he told the other boys his plan for being safe when he got moved to the adults. He said, I'm going, as soon as they put me in my new cell, with my new adult cellmate, I'm going to act as crazy as possible and make that person as scared of me as I possibly can. Well, the next week when I went back for the Bible study, they told me that a guard who was that day down in the juvenile section had earlier been up in the section where this boy had been moved, and gleefully told the boys in the juvenile section that by breakfast of that same morning, which was about 4:30 in the jail, that by breakfast, that boy who got transferred up was retrieving the breakfast for his cellmate and was basically caring for his cellmate. A few weeks later, Warren was moved to an adult prison for processing. Inmates usually stay there about 6 weeks while the Department of Corrections decides where they're going to spend the rest of their sentence. In this adult prison, they had no way of keeping him safe except to put him in solitary confinement. And in this adult prison, they had no way of keeping him in solitary confinement except to treat him as a person who was in the jail and had acted up and had to be punished by being put in solitary confinement. The same rules had to apply to him as everyone else. He only got out for 1 hour a day. He only got to shower 3 times a week. Anytime he left his cell, he had to be shackled hand to hand, foot to foot, and hands to feet. When I finally got to visit him in that jail, they brought him to the cafeteria, and he was completely shackled. And the guards who brought him in, they apologized to me and said, sorry, but that was protocol for anyone in solitary confinement. They finally put in a call to the warden and eventually got an answer back that he could have his shackles removed for our visit. Warren's judge asked the Department of Corrections to let him serve the first part of his sentence in a juvenile prison, and the DOC said yes. So Warren is at Cypress Creek right now. It's a maximum security juvenile prison. Christian, who was in the video, was also there. I happened to meet him last week when I was down visiting Warren. Warren finished high school a year early and graduated valedictorian of all the boys in his prison, and is currently blazing through online college courses and is applying for a master's program at Moody Bible Institute. He won the 2014 Governor Florida State Department of Juvenile Justice Mentoring Award for the work that he has done at Cypress Creek in mentoring other inmates. He is fortunate. If he had been in an adult prison all this time, I'm sure I would be telling you a very different story right now. His time in the DJJ will soon come to an end, and he will be transferred to an adult prison. No one will care about his education after that. He will no longer have access to a counselor or any of the other opportunities that are only available to those who are considered as potentially redeemable. State attorneys say there's no need to make any changes. They're doing better. They're sending less, in most counties at least. That's what the state attorneys are saying. That's like telling a police officer who pulls you over for doing 40 in a 20-mile-per-hour school zone, "Officer, there's no reason for you to get involved. I've already slowed down from 60 to 40. Everything is fine here." My theology says that we should err on the side of all children being redeemable. And I believe that for the majority of children who fail to be redeemed, the fault is ours as their society for failing them. Tanya will tell you about laws that should be passed so that we can treat more children like children. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train a child up in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." When we put children in adult jails, make no mistake, we are training them up in a way to go. But it will not be the way that we want. And remember finally what Bonhoeffer said. The test of the morality of a society is what it does for our children. What are we doing for our children? Thank you.